I know most people would say like a celebrity or somebody well known, but I really have to say my grandmother. She showed me how to accept and to work with what you have and be grateful for what you have. I remember she told us when she was younger, they would go to the dump and find utensils and pack them up and take them back with them to wash and to clean. They would find old material, and her mother would make sheets or clothes with it. So I thought that was very interesting because nowadays we would never step foot or go near a dumpster, but they did that. And, you know, she said they had only 2 sets of clothes. For when they worked in the field, they had those clothes. And then when they were done, they had to put on their school clothes. So those were the only sets of clothes that they had. And for me wearing just 2 Alfreds every single day and switching up, that was not gonna work. So I admired her for that a lot, explaining that because I had no idea that that's what they went through. And then looking at her, how she worked hard for her family until she couldn't anymore. She would always cook nonstop. My grandfather would always get his food first and then the children, and she was last. So I kind of was like, you know, I like my food, I want to eat first, but that's not what you did back then. So I respected her for that. You know, she cared for people, she put people first before herself. So that really brought me of how I should care for others growing up, and how I want my family to be as well. So I look at her as the most influential person in my life as far as, you know, race.
Honestly, he was my high school wrestling coach. He was African American, and uh, he was the most influential because he pushed me the hardest, harder than my parents. My parents were tough. They were really tough. They're from New York and Philadelphia, so they were really hard on us and strict. But he pushed me physically and mentally to levels that I didn't know I had. I was very successful at wrestling in high school, and I was successful against kids who had been wrestling since they were 8 and 9 years old. And it was because we would get them to a point of uh, wanting to tap out mentally. So he taught me a lot about mental toughness. And even when I think I've spent everything I had, if I just believe I can go farther and continue to push myself, that I can. So those values and things that I learned from him throughout high school, it got me through a time in my adulthood when I was in jail. I did 13 months in jail before I finally got my life together. And it got me through difficulties and hardships throughout my tenure through scholastics when I was trying to get my degrees. You know, I had a wife and kids, and I was working full time and going to school at night. So it was a tough 6 or 8 years. And the things that I learned from him about pushing yourself, staying focused, that's what really helped me.
Oh, this is the easy one. I didn't even have to think about it. She still lives in my heart. It's my great grandmother. She's unfortunately not with us on earth anymore. But she used to say all these things. I spent a lot of time with her. Actually, my mom and I lived with her for a long, maybe, I don't know, time, being a little kid, but we lived with her and my great grandfather for a little bit. And she always used to tell me these nuggets, I call them. She was my favorite one because I always use it as an adult. She used to always tell me, baby, you got to remember, you always treat people the way you'd like to be treated. And I would say, okay, but I was like, oh, okay, I don't know. So I'd go on my merry way. She would always give me nuggets, always. A lot of them I had no clue as to what she was meaning. But as I got older, and my mom used to always say some of them too, but that particular one, for some reason, I wanted to understand more what that meant. And then I think I was a teenager, and I kept thinking about it, and it finally came to me like years later. And I realized what she was telling me: when you're out around other people, you're not rude because you don't want them to be rude to you. You just treat them the same way that you would like them to treat you. I finally got it. It was just a light bulb for me. It was just something that it just has always held on to me. And that's the way my great grandmother taught me all these things and gave me these nuggets. And I now have been using them for years. Everyone I would understand, and my mom would say them. So I said, Mama, what does that mean? Because being a kid, you're like, who cares? But my great grandmother was my role model. And she still is, because her spirit is still with me.
That's split because it was two. I have two. I'm fortunate to have two. The first, his name is James William Taylor. He was my grandfather. He drove a garbage truck for the city of Norfolk. He worked for the city of Norfolk a total of like 32 years. And then the other was my Uncle Thomas James Taylor. He worked for Greyhound. He was a bus mechanic. And through these two, you know, they were right there because I was between my mom's house and my grandmother's house. So they were the most influential men, you know, I saw. You know, I see my uncle get up, go to work. He always brought us books to read. Before there were reading programs in our libraries, in our communities, he would have my cousins and I, we would be not in competition, but he would give us books and we would have to read these books. You know, I remember reading the autobiography of Malcolm X before people were really reading it because he gave it to me. Different Black authors, you know, that he was introducing us to. And I think it was, you know, good for them because they went through things during the 60s and 70s. And he was one of the ones trying to make sure that we were aware of who we are, of who we were. So those are the two most influential. My grandfather was a hard worker. He was there, you know, and one of the greatest things he ever did, he said, I want to teach you about money. You know, because a lot of us, we don't come up with bank accounts. We don't come up with savings accounts. He brought all of us, and I'm talking about a lot of us as cousins, and him and my grandmother, they brought these little bunny rabbit piggy bank. I will never forget them. They were gray and brown. And they taught us to put the money in there to save it.
My aunt, my great aunt, actually, she was a school teacher. And at the time, she was the only one that had graduated from college. So I kind of looked up to her because, you know, she graduated from college. She was a teacher. She was able to travel and go to different places. So I thought that was just so cool. And she had a real important impact in my life.
My daddy. And I know I'm 44 years old, but my daddy. My father died when I was 17, liver and colon cancer. He passed away. And that is one of the main reasons why I began to mentor. The gap that was left when my father passed at a very time, it was 17 years old. So you're going into it, the next year you'd be 18, you'd be quote unquote an adult. And I was just lost. I was angry, I was mad. And even when I'm telling you how my father passed, that's another thing where Black males are always known to not have a father in the home. And I felt like every conversation that I had, if my mother was there and my father wasn't, I would always have to say, well, my dad died. He died of colon and liver cancer. It just wasn't that my dad. So it showed the impact. And what I learned from Chapman and Chancellor is that when they were looking for someone to mentor them, they said that they wanted someone that didn't yell. And when I started spending time with them, I would talk very softly and very calmly. And I didn't understand their background where their father was verbally abusive to them. And I didn't know that we could still yell and have fun. And they were like, oh, no, we just meant don't yell. So it was just kind of that thing, that breaking barrier of having those conversations of like, wow, okay. Because I was when we played football or played something, I was kind of like, yeah, you know, good job. It was like, no, it wasn't that. It was, you could yell in that, but it just didn't want to be yelled at per se. And also another fact with my father being such a impact in my life is I wanted them to spend time with my family. When I first started mentoring, I didn't have children. Now I have two. And when my daughter was born and when my son was born, we would all spend time as a unit, my wife and the two kids, and it was an extended family. And the thing that touched me the most is that he said, man, you really like being a dad. And I was like, that is the greatest gig that I've ever had, is being a father. So just him being in that environment and seeing me wrestle and play with my daughter and my son was just, it was huge. It was really, really, there's no amount of money that could have been paid at that point during mentoring for someone that I was mentoring to see what it was like to have a father, mother in the home, a loving home. It was great. It was great. And I apologize getting a little misty-eyed, but it was great. It was an experience that I would trade for nothing.